Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well out there. Just another reminder for you guys, if you've not done so already, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group and get the inside scoop on all things BYU sports coming to your phone in the form of a text message. Just $5 a month to be a part of the group. But the best part, the kicker, I guess, is you get a 14-day free trial, 2 full weeks before you're charged anything. So join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, let's talk about BYU football. Now, Ryder Lyons is continuing to get a lot of national pub out there, and for good reason. He's a 5-star prospect. He is visiting top shelf programs across the country. I was on Locked On College Football this past week with Spencer McLaughlin, and we talked about the fact that if BYU can beat out the likes of Oregon, USC, Ole Miss, Michigan, Ohio State, there is like the who's who of college football chasing this young man. If BYU can beat them all out, as Spencer pointed out, it would kind of point to BYU making a pivot into being an elite recruiter in the college football sphere. Now, over this weekend, I don't remember when the podcast came out. Locked On Ole Miss, of course, and Locked On the Portals, two of our great podcasts here at the Locked On Podcast Network, they were talking about Ryder Lyons and his visit to Ole Miss over the weekend, and they came down to the consensus that if Ryder Lyons had to commit today, they said it would be BYU. He would pick the Cougars at this juncture. And that echoes a lot of what I've heard talking to people over the weekend. A couple of people sent me the link to that podcast and said, Jake, have you heard this? And I listened to the podcast, and Brian and Steven, who do the show, they do a really, really fine job. And they really, I think, broke it down quite well. And they made some good points about what to expect for the process of Ryder Lyons and him deciding where he's going to go. He is reportedly going to visit Ohio State and Michigan in a very short order here. I think it's maybe later this week. But as it stands right now, he has 3 official visits scheduled. Those are coming up in June. They will be to USC, Oregon, and BYU. And currently, BYU is the last of the 3 to have the official visit set. I think it's June 20th. That's going to be a very impactful weekend for BYU to put their best foot forward and maybe have their final pitch to Ryder Lyons and explain to him why they believe that they should be where he plays. The bigger point to be made is BYU is swinging for the fences here, and they are competing very favorably with some of the nation's elite programs, especially elite programs when it comes to developing quarterbacks. Jackson Dart is a prep star from the state of Utah, obviously played at Roy High School before finishing up at Corner Canyon. Well, he went to Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin and just put together a pretty phenomenal career, and there's a large majority of our NFL draft analysts out there that believe that he has worked himself into a place where he will not make it out of the first round of the NFL draft. That's a very compelling pitch to a kid who is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints like Jackson Dart is to turn around and pitch a guy like Ryder Lyons as to why he should go to the Grove and play for the Rebels and play for Lane Kiffin. That you can say the same thing for what Oregon could do when they pitch him. The same thing for USC. Well, BYU, all they've got to pitch is, okay, look at the pantheon of our quarterbacks going over the past, let's say, 50 years and tell us that we have not had some of the best, if not the best quarterbacks in the game. Yes, I know that Jim McMahon probably doesn't resonate today like, let's say, Jackson Dart does. Let's say Oregon could pitch a guy out there like, I don't know who you want to insert from Oregon. Like there are BYU's. Let me get back to the original point. The point is that BYU can point at a track record over 50 years of saying, hey, we've had high-level quarterback play, and when we have had high-level quarterback play, look at the results. It's led us to pretty high heights, and in fact, we won a national championship. That's what BYU's pitch needs to be to Ryder Lyons, and it's good to hear people who have no affiliation and are separated from BYU by thousands of miles. Brian and Steven, the hosts of Locked On the Portal, speaking of Brian and Steven Willis, who does Locked On Ole Miss, they're both based in Florida. They're thousands upon thousands of miles away from BYU, but they understand what BYU's doing here in terms of why they are in the mix for a guy like Ryder Lyons. Yes, it helps that he's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yes, it helps that he's planning on going on a mission. BYU has a track record working with that, obviously, as this institution sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The other part of it is that the track record BYU can point to with Ryder Lyons and say, hey, you're a top shelf quarterback. When we've had top shelf quarterbacks in our system and in our program, and just most recently look at Jake Retzloff and what he did last year, leading BYU to an 11-2 season. The nice part is top shelf quarterbacks come here, they thrive, and more importantly, they win, and they win at a very, very high level. Max Hall, John Beck, Ty Detmer, Steve Young, Robbie Bosco, Gifford Nilsson, Mark Wilson. The list goes on and on and on about these great quarterbacks. Zach Wilson, Jaron Hall. You can go down just a really, really long list. And maybe at some point I need to rank BYU's all-time quarterbacks, but it's a pretty elite list of quarterback play. And Aaron Roderick and the BYU coaching staff led by Kalani Sitake, they've got some very compelling points they can make to a kid like Ryder Lyons. But I was very intrigued to hear that two of our podcasts on this network who aren't necessarily inclined to be hooting and hollering about BYU believe that the Cougars right now are in the lead for Ryder Lyons. Is that going to last? It's anybody's guess, because Ryder ultimately has to come down and decide where he wants to play. But right now, that's a positive spot to be in for BYU, to be perceived to be the leader in his recruitment, because that means the BYU's made a very positive impression. He visited BYU during spring camp on an unofficial visit, and he was hanging out with some of the other top prospects in this recruiting class that BYU's chasing, most notably a guy like Brock Harris, who's going to announce his commitment later this afternoon. If you missed it, 2:30 Mountain Time. If you want to tune in, he'll be doing it at his high school down there at Pineview in St. George, Utah. But there's a lot to like about the noise that BYU's making on the recruiting front, both in basketball and football right now. And I think getting a guy like Ryder Lyons to commit to BYU football, it's not the same level of commitment as an AJ DeBonce is, because he's not the top-rated player overall in the recruiting class, but he's a top-shelf quarterback and would, I think, make a lot of people sit up a little straighter and say, hey, what's BYU doing here? They're continuing to win on the recruiting trail. And that's what you want to do if you're BYU. You want to win, and you want to win at a high level. You need top shelf talent, and Ryder Lyons appears to be just that. And I'm hopeful that BYU can win this recruiting battle and bring him in, because I really think he's got the goods that could help elevate BYU for a long, long run here in the Big 12 Conference. So we'll track it all, obviously. It sounds like he's going to make a decision before too long, but I'd be very surprised if that decision comes before he makes those official visits in June. But hey, maybe he comes out to BYU in late June and the very next week, or maybe the day after he gets home, commits to the BYU Cougars and sets the recruiting world on fire by picking BYU. I hope it all comes to fruition, but I really was intrigued to hear Locked on the Portal and Locked on Ole Miss said. And like I said, talking to people trying to get some clarification on it that I trust, they say that that's kind of where BYU sits right now, where they are considered to be one of, if not the favorite, for Ryder Lyons. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. As always, thank you for all y'all's support. Please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends. Do all the things to help this audience grow. It's cool to see the interaction and the growth we are seeing with the podcast, and it's all due to you. So thank you for your support. As always, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And once again, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.